Thank you, Member for Wakefield. The questions and grievances has been noted. I call the Honourable Member for Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I refer to a headline of the newspaper today, the Riverine Herald. It's called "Water-Starved Farmer is only weeks from disaster," then the bigger heading, "Drowning in Despair." And it's the story from the Echuca area in the Victorian side. Nanneela dairy farmer John Bryan with his employee Scott Thompson. And the saddest of this story is that Scott Thompson's likely to lose his job on this dairy farm in the next few weeks. Behind the photo, you've got the bed off soil and some very hungry-looking dairy cows. The tragedy is not that this is about drought. You might have more automatically imagined that I'm talking about an extension of the Millennium Drought, the worst drought on record, that we have seen no rain perhaps, and this is just a failure of the irrigation system's dams. Perhaps they're empty. Well, in fact, this isn't a failure of climate at all. This is a shocking, reckless failure of policy and process. It's a failure of both state and federal government policy and process, beginning back with the Labor government, then at the time under the Greens' balance of power, when they brought into being the Murray Darling Basin Plan, and tragically without any understanding of the need to have a balanced triple bottom line. That was always the objective of the Water Act, that there be a balance between the environment, the community and the economy. That the environment certainly would have waters returned to it where there was demonstrated over-allocation of irrigation entitlements, and we know that those did exist on some rivers in New South Wales in particular. It wasn't the farmers' fault, it was because over generations farmers hadn't activated their licences until an irrigation licence became a thing of value, and then it was discovered that while those sleeper and dozer licences had laid idle on people's land titles, other allocations had been made. When all activated those entitlements, yes, there was some over-allocation on some streams. Tragically, though, in the middle of the worst drought on record, the then Minister for the Environment, Penny Wong, decided it would be a very good thing and a much cheaper way to get water for the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder to put over a $50 million tender into the Murray Darling Basin and call for farmers to sell their water to the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. She was prepared to pay, and she did pay, over $2,000 per megalitre, where she knew it would cost maybe $3,000 to $5,000 if she was going to find that same water through environmental works and measures. So clearly it was a great deal for the Commonwealth. Tragically, it was a tragic deal for little communities and larger communities right through the Murray Darling Basin. I now have schools like Invergordon in my electorate who had 60 students several years ago, a thriving community with some of the best soils, best climates in the Murray Darling Basin. That school is down to 6 students. At the Tatura Primary School, once had 3 or 4 buses bringing farm children into that primary school every day. There's now a few kids from a few families on 1 bus. What's happened to all those farm families? What's happened to all of those jobs that went along with thriving food manufacturing in the great Northern Victoria Golden Murray Irrigation District? Well, the tragedy is that of the 2,721 irrigation farms, 1,143 sold all or most of their water to the Minister, Penny Wong, in the middle of the worst drought on record, because the bank said if you don't sell your water, we'll sell your farm, you owe us too much. And at the time, the water market was only $40 per megalitre. It was rational to imagine you could continue to farm using the temporary water market. Again, tragically, like any market situation, if you double and triple the number of buyers but halve the number of sellers or the volume of the product that's in the market, you have a massive increase in price. And that's what we've seen, particularly since the market was uncapped as well in terms of who could buy that water. It's the most fabulous little money earner now, the Murray Darling Basin temporary water market. I have to say that one of the best one of the buyers making the best profit out of this is the Victorian government itself, who owns 75 gigalitres of what was once irrigators' water. They were traded that water when there was a pipeline built from the Golden Murray system to Melbourne in the middle of that worst drought on record. The pipeline's been plugged through the massive community effort to put that right and to try and force Melbourne instead to use its desalinisation plant or to recycle or stormwater harvest its water. That pipeline's now shut, but Melbourne Water still has 75 gigalitres a year. It can't get it through the pipeline's closed, but it speculates with that water, pushing prices up and having a wonderful little earner for the Victorian government on the side. The South Australian state government did the same with 8 gigalitres it bought the other day. It thought secretly, but the whistle was blown on them, and it flushes that water down the toilets of Adelaide while people like dairy farmer John Bryan has to sack his employees and watch his cattle starve. Now, this is absurd. I have now got a second phase of water removals from the GMID, the Golden Murray Irrigation District, that has been identified by its official mid-term review as unconscionable, as no value for money, that its secret business plan, in fact, never was required to take into account the impact of removal of another 204 gigalitres of water out of the area. The farmer impact was ignored. The actual sustainability or viability of the irrigation system itself, once all that water was removed, was not in fact part of the business case or the business plan. I can't be sure of that, of course. I only know what the mid-term reviews told me, because while I've gone into freedom of information request for the copy of this business plan, I've asked both the Victorian State Government and the Commonwealth, both have rejected my request for the $1 billion of federal funding to fund the removal of this 204 gigalitres from my irrigators. They're already down to just 900 gigalitres in the Golden Murray irrigation system. It once had over 1,600 gigalitres. Golden Murray Water itself, a state-owned government authority with over 800 employees, a shocking, top-heavy, managed and incompetent mob. That Golden Murray Water itself says the system is no longer viable under 900 gigalitres of water for it to manage entitlement of irrigators' water. And with another 204 to go, you can see what I mean by the total collapse of the irrigation system, which has been the size of Tasmania, the biggest irrigation system in Australia. And that's why I quite deliberately began my remarks by referring to a reckless failure of policy and process as a description of this state and federal government funded program. It was Tony Burke who signed off the deal with the state government, saying we'll give you $1 billion and you give us 204 gigalitres of your water for the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. Yes, we know it can't use what it's got already in store, the CEWH. We know that it carries over more than the volume of Sydney Harbour each year, while farmers are trapped in the worst drought on record. We had the tragedy of Nanneela rice mill sacking 50 people 2 weeks ago. They couldn't grow the rice. I can't understand why the Victorian government will not accept that the mid-term review found that its business case was based on false assumptions. Those assumptions were that farmers actually wanted to go broke and leave their properties and have their channels pushed in. Funny thing that was a false assumption. Blind Freddie could have told them, if they'd asked an irrigator, that that was not what they wanted to see happen. That mid-term review also said that the program itself was incompetently handled, that the claims of savings were not, in fact, genuine savings, that the governance and communication between the parties meant the risk was not communicated, understood, managed, elevated or actioned between parties in a timely manner. I mean, the whole thing is a complete disgrace. It follows on the first stage of this removal of water from irrigators, which was called the Northern Victorian Irrigation Renewal Project, or NVIRP. That first stage one was funded $1 billion by the state government. It took 225 gigalitres out of the system. The Ombudsman's review of that stage one had it actually abolished for corruption, insider trading, incompetent action. Tragically for us who live in this region, the workers, most of the people who are seconded to work on NVIRP were simply then rolled back into GMW and continue with their hands on the steering wheel. This, I believe, needs a Royal Commission. This Golden Murray Water managed state-owned action funded by the federal government must have a Royal Commission to look at the incompetence, the scamming that's going on, the plastic lining of channels which are perfectly clay-lined as we speak, the building of infrastructure on channels that have been dried off in the 1960s, but they earn points towards claiming that there's been a water saving, and so the federal funds keep pouring into the Victorian government coffers. This is a disgrace. I call on a Royal Commission. I believe that the Australian taxpayer deserves to know what shocking waste of their funds, their monies, is occurring. But the tragedy, of course, is for the irrigators, the communities, the economy of Northern Victoria and southern New South Wales.